The year is 1804. Beneath the snow of Šumadija, the land trembles, not from winter's chill, but from fear. The Turkish Janissaries, rebels against the Sultan, are slaughtering Serbian Knezes one by one. Blood flows through the streets of Valjevo, Ćuprija, and Belgrade. The cries of the people echo, and in the shadow of incense and plague, an idea takes shape: rebellion. Serbian rebellion. The whip of Ottoman tyranny has reached the bone, but the people have decided to no longer be silent. At the end of the 18th century, the Ottoman Empire was clearly in decline. The Janissary Corps, once the elite of the Sultan's army, had become a destructive, rebellious force. Turkey was losing battles in wars against Austria and Russia, and internal weaknesses were devouring its provinces. The great powers increasingly viewed the Balkans as prey in the struggle for influence. The so-called Eastern Question was born. But while the French and Russians vied for dominance, the Serbs experienced something that would ignite the flame of uprising. The last Austro-Turkish War, 1788 to 1791, ended by the Treaty of Sistova, brought the Serbs only fleeting hope. Fighting as Hajduk alongside the Austrians, they gained political and military experience, but not freedom. Sultan Selim III attempted reforms, among other things expelling the Janissaries from the Belgrade Pashalik. Instead of terror, the authorities increasingly relied on the Serbs. Thus, Hadzi Mustafa Pasha, whom the Serbian people called the Serbian mother for his respect and care towards Serbs, rose to the position of governor, who granted Serbian Knezes wider powers: tax collection, partial judiciary authority, local self-government. In those years, the Serbs began to revive the economy and plan a future without Turkish terror. But the peace did not last long. The expelled Janissaries, armed and enraged, found refuge with Pazvan Oglu in the Vidin Pashalik. Disregarding the Sultan, he began attacking Serbian villages. The Serbs defeated him near Kaladi in 1793 and again in 1797, raising a people's army of 16,000 under the command of Stanko Arambasic. Yet, as Napoleon marched into Egypt in 1798, the Porte, preoccupied with external threats, was forced to allow the Janissaries back into Serbia. They soon clashed with the Serbian Knezes and in 1801 took Belgrade, killing Hadzi Mustafa Pasha. His son arrived too late, only to learn his father was dead. Power now fell into the hands of 4 Janissaries: Küçük Alija, Agnalia, Mulla Yusuf, and Mehmed Aga Focic. Calling themselves Dahije, they began to rule with terror. They revoked all privileges granted by the 1793 and 1794 firmans, judged on their own authority, imposed new taxes, arrested, tortured, and killed. The Ottoman Porte was powerless. The Sultan had no control over his Pashalik. Serbs, Turks loyal to Mustafa, and even some Spahis all began to conspire. In Zemun, the dissatisfied gathered, among them the prominent Petar Ichko. Vladika's court in Montenegro sent letters. The Russians refused support, and the Serbs appeared to be preparing for uprising, on their own. The Dahije sensed danger and decided to prevent it. At the beginning of 1804, they launched a terrifying campaign: the slaughter of the Knezes. They killed the most prominent Serbs: Knez Aleksa Nenadovic, Ilija Birkan, Knez Petar of Ćuprija, Hadži Ruvim. In just a few days, more than 70 Knezes, priests, merchants, and notable people were murdered. Brought to Belgrade, recorded Mihailo Pejic from Zemun, the people were forced to surrender weapons, flee to the forests, and some already began to seek revenge. In the west, Jakov Nenadovic and his nephew, priest Matija, rose. In the east, Milenko Stojkovic and Petar Dobenjak. Among all, one name began to shine: Karađorđe. First, 3 national leaders gathered in Šumadija: Đorđe Petrovic, whom the Turks called Karađorđe, then Jan Katic and Vasa Čarapic. Around them quickly gathered many, both local Serbian population and Hajduks, among whom were Stanoje Glabaš and Hajduk Veljko. Upon this news, the people rose even beyond the Kolubara River, where Jakov Nenadovic, Alex's brother, and priest Luka Lazarevic stood out. A similar situation was on the other side of the Morava River, where Milenko Stojkovic and Petar Todorovic Dobrnjak distinguished themselves. Soon almost the entire country was under arms. At the assembly of the most prominent men of Šumadija, Stanoje Glabaš was first proposed as the leader of the uprising, but he refused. Then Knez Teodosira Maričević from Ora was proposed, who also declined. On his suggestion, Karađorđe was chosen as the leader of the uprising. On February 14, 1804, at the gathering in Orašac, attended by about 300 people, mostly from the vicinity, The assembly in the village of Orašac was not a representative or national parliament, but a meeting of elders, mostly from Šumadija. It was not about electing a nationwide leader, but about the leader of the uprising in that area. The Dahije were surprised and frightened by the massiveness of the uprising, and thus began to attempt to stop it, through bribery, negotiations, and deception. Agnalia, with about 400 Janissaries, went to Šumadija on February 21, 1804, aiming to negotiate with the insurgents, but, in reality, the main goal was to attack the rebels. He promised the Serbian people better conditions and the abolition of customs houses, offering Karađorđe money or an estate in Austria better than his in Topola. Karađorđe refused personal offers and asked for guarantees from the Austrians regarding regime change, as he could not rely on Turkish promises. Since Agnalia did not agree, he and his army suffered defeat at the Battle of Drlupa on February 24th, where he was wounded in the leg and barely escaped to Belgrade. This was the first conflict between insurgents and Dahije and their first victory. The significance of this victory was great, as it raised the morale of the Serbian population. After the defeat at Drlupa, the Dahije attempted to stop the uprising with negotiations. On March 4, in Hadzi Pasha's town, Karađorđe received Dahije delegates and demanded their surrender, which was refused. Negotiations failed. Under Karađorđe's leadership, the insurgents captured Rudnik on March 18. In April, they defeated the Janissaries near Batočina and Jagodina, and routed the remnants near Leštane, bravely commanded by Vasa Čarapić. By the end of April, the entire Šumadija was cleared of Turks. The insurgents approached Belgrade, causing panic among the Dahije. They sought help from Bosnia and Vidin, but the Porte could not assist because the Dahije themselves were rebels. Pazvanoglu, once an ally, now aimed to seize control over Belgrade but did not receive approval. The situation was tense, and the uprising was strengthening. Freedom was getting closer. As Karađorđe and Jakov Nenadović tightened the noose around Belgrade, news of the uprising reached Constantinople. Hasan Beg, Ibrahim Aga, and others tried to turn the Sultan's attention to Serbia. The Grand Vizier sent orders. Bosnian Pasha Bečir arrived with 3,000 men. The Dahije began to fear. Could the Pasha and the populace unite? That would be unthinkable. Yet, it happened. In April, Karađorđe attempted to seek protection from Austria, but was rejected. Nevertheless, they secretly traded weapons. The Serbs were alone, but no longer helpless. As the uprising erased Ottoman rule from Šumadija, forces became more organized. Čarapić on the Danube, Jakov on the Sava, Karađorđe and Katić in the center, the whole country under arms. Bečir Pasha arrived as the Sultan's representative, ready to remove the Dahije and restore order. The people stood with Karađorđe. But before the insurgents lay a new threat. A stronger Turkish army from Bosnia was coming. There was no turning back. What followed was the bloody Battle of Čokašina, the Serbian Thermopylae. Brothers Nenadović, monks, and Serbian blood soaking the monastery field. But more about that in the next episode.